Hello there. In this tutorial, we will go through the very basics of vectors. What is a vector? A vector is a physical quantity that has both the magnitude and direction. A vector is geometrically represented by an arrow. The length of an arrow represents the magnitude of a vector, and the arrow tip represents the direction of the vector. So this is our vector V here, and the yellow dot there represents the initial point, which is the tail of a vector, and the light blue one, the sign, or represents the head of the vector, which is the terminal point. And the length of this arrow, how long this arrow is, represents the magnitude of the vector. And the orientation of this red tip there represents the direction of the vector. So now let's look at the scalar multiplication of vector. What is a scalar multiplication of a vector? Well, a scalar multiplication of a vector is as follows. If you're given this vector v1 there, then a scalar multiplication of vector v1 is another vector that you obtain by multiplying v1 by a real number. So let's look at an example. If I have this v1 there, then I can form another vector that is a scalar multiplication of v1 by multiplying v1 by the real number 2. So v2 is 2 times v1. So the magnitude of v2 is 2 times the magnitude of v1, and v2 is parallel to v1. Another example is if my real number is 0.5, then when I multiply v1 by 0.5, I get a vector that is parallel to v1 with a magnitude that is half of v1. And all these vectors, they are parallel to each other. v2 is parallel to v1, and v1 is parallel to v3. This is also the case for vectors that are vertical. So all these vectors are parallel to each other, so they are all scalar multiples of each other. Right? So can you now guess or sketch, just work out what do you think v2 will look like if v2 is equal to minus 1 over 2 times v1. So what do? I have v1 here, and now in this here I'm trying to figure out how to get v2 using v1, given that v2 is minus 1 over 2 times v1. Well, this is what I get. The minus means that you get a vector that has the same magnitude as v1, but its direction is opposite to v1. So that's a negative of the vector v1 is minus v1. Well, I'm going to write that down there. Is that the definition is negative of a vector is a vector that has the same magnitude as the given vector, but its direction is opposite to that of a given vector. So that is negative of a vector v1 is minus v1. The magnitude is the same. Magnitude of minus v1 is the same as magnitude of v1, but the direction of minus v1 is opposite to the direction of v1. Anyway, now I have minus v1 there. How do I get v2? Well, I think it's easy. It's easy to see that we will have to multiply this vector here by a half, so we'll reduce this vector by a half to get our answer, which is v2 is minus 1 over 2 times v1, right? Can you try and do the same for this vector v1 there? V1 is pointing downwards. So now what we want to sketch is minus 3 over 2 times v1. Again, I'm trying to work out the minus 3 over 2 v1 given the vector v1 is pointing downwards. This is my v1 there, and then this is my minus v1, and then that's my minus 3 over 2 times v1. Remember that 3 over 2 is 1.5, so that is my answer there. This green vector is equal to minus 3 over 2 times v1. Right, so now let's move on to vector addition, but I think let's do that in the next video.